Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Brand Called You. So listen, I couldn't be more excited to have today's guest, Saranne Rothberg. She is somebody who has the capacity to transform even the darkest mornings into sunshine. I know because I am one of these curmudgeons. I'm a New Yorker who can't even get through going to the post office without being angry at the world. Um, Simply mundane tasks living in New York City seem like the biggest schlep, and it leaves me feeling depressed and angry, but that isn't the case with our current guests. You, Saranne, you have transformed your life in so many amazing ways. I couldn't be happier to have you here, and I'll just give a brief introduction about you. Um, Saranne was diagnosed in 1998 with stage 4 cancer. And she transformed that experience, even from the chemo chair, by starting the Comedy Cures Foundation, which was designed to use humor to help people not only get through their diagnosis, but to heal themselves. And it's pretty remarkable what she's accomplished since then. Her comic perspective to help her beat stage 4 cancer, but she made it her mission to share humor and laughter and help others with their challenges. And currently, she collaborates with Fortune 500 companies, medical centers, the World Health Organization, United Nations. I could go on and on and on, and really uses humor in a million and one different ways to help people heal and move forward. So welcome.
You, Lisa. Maybe I should go do errands with you in New York because I find New Yorkers hilarious. I find the whole energy of New York funny, and I love to pick up random strangers and just like brighten their day. If I see people with a frown or getting treated wrong or just having a really bad experience, I feel like I must be the ambassador of the city because I'll intervene and just make them smile, give them a hug, hand them
Mhm.
a present. I don't know. I feel that New York gets a bad rap, and I love to encounter people like you in the city because I
Yeah.
want I want to just spread that positivity. So thank you.
Let me just go back a bit. I mean, were you always somebody that had a heightened sense of empathy and that always wanted to help others prior to your diagnosis?
I have always been that way. I think becoming a scout for comedians also at a very young age and surrounding myself with comedy as a profession originally really helped me just see the funny side of life. And that's what I love about the podcast that I get to do, Beating Cancer Daily, and what my charity's mission is, the Comedy Cures Foundation, because I get to teach comic perspective to people who are in their most challenging time, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or they've lost their house to a fire or they've
Mhm.
been robbed and they don't have, any funds at the time. They're homeless. I get to go into that situation and show how a comic perspective, thinking about your situation comedically, can not only reduce depression, stress, and anxiety, but by doing this strategy, it can really help increase your self empowerment. And when people are struggling, just giving them a pathway to self empowerment, no matter how small that is, that's giving hope. And we've all seen the studies, just a little bit of hope can help transform any situation. And
Yeah.
that's what I discovered in my chemo chair and in my cancer journey is that as long as I could manufacture hope for myself, even when the doctors can give me hope, I could keep going. And as long as I could keep going, I could keep raising my daughter. And thank God, eventually found my way to a full cure. I have full remission according to the medical community for decades now. And that was really made possible because of this perspective that I have.
Let me ask you something. I mean, I know there's been you've obviously been working with a lot of medical studies to support your work, but um, for those of us for whom humor is not natural, for whom, the dark side is natural, like me, right? Who's cynical first. If you contrive it to start with, if you fake it till you make it, do you actually create real changes in the brain that can affect your body? In other words, can you kind of artificially contrive something that ultimately becomes physically real?
That's so clever. Yes. I mean, now neuroscience has proved it. But originally, when I started this, that didn't exist, right? The mind body connection is so powerful, and that has been proven so many times. And I can quote different studies to enlighten you. But yes, your instincts are right. I want to just give you one clue in. So, my mom, who's now deceased, was blind. And I had another family member who was blind also. So, from my earliest toddler recollection, I remember being asked to see need, right? So, I was asked to tell time. I was asked to tell what denomination a bill was. I was asked to make sure a path was clear, if lights were on, if the table was set, what did the plate look like? Where was the protein, the starch, the vegetable? And I had to think of ways to do that. And so I was taught to read and perceive very young, and I saw the consequences that if I didn't meet a need, that somebody would get truly injured. So I became hyper aware of people and their surroundings so young. And I think I've just transitioned that into what I get to do every day, which is run a nonprofit that actually serves and helps people in need. The part about the comedy came from the fact that my father loved comedy. And at a very, very young age, he took me to see my first comedian, which was Jackie Mason. And
Oh,
yeah, and the irony with Jackie was he was the first comedian that I saw as a very young child, but he was the first major comedian to perform for the Comedy Cures Foundation, which is my charity, when I had cancer. And I just thought that that full circle moment for me was just so powerful. And he did the first significant fundraiser for our organization when I had cancer. And I just thought, this is just an amazing synchronicity. I think there are no accidents. I really believe that things happen in such a divine way, including me getting cancer, because I would never have seen the need for what I get to do every day if I hadn't been in that chair and I hadn't gone through this. And once you've experienced, then it gives you an ability to serve at a very heightened level. So I love what I do, and I love integrating meeting need with comedy.
you know, I had a feeling you had a background like that because I share that. I mean, I'm the child of a Holocaust survivor. And my mother was one of those ones that never talked about her pain or her memories, but you had to read between the lines. Have a tremendous hyper radar as a result. But I think I- I'm struggling with something now, which is she has multiple myeloma and she's in hospice now, my mother. And for the last few years, I've kind of forgotten to attend to my own life. In fact, I've sacrificed it in service to her, which was an early instinct, maybe not a healthy one. And I wonder if your work also addresses those caregivers as well as those recipients of, because I sure could use some strategies, you know?
Well, first thing I'm going to say is that I've been both, and I am both the caregiver and the patient. And I'm going to say things that patients sometimes get really up in arms about. But I truly believe that being the caregiver is a harder role than being the patient. And the reason why I say that is because as the patient, I can get up every day and make choices. And as the caregiver, you're at the whim of the patient.
Yeah.
So if the patient decides I'm going to be a curmudgeon today, or I'm not going to follow my treatments,
Mm.
or I'm just going to lash out at everybody, you're kind of in the whipping area of all of that, right? Your first line of receiving all of that emotion or hate. And yes, it is an honor to care for our elders. It is an honor to be a caregiver, I truly believe. But as a patient, you really get to dictate how you approach the world minute by minute by minute. And I happened to decide that I was going to do it with humor and service. That could be a tall order for some people. But I think that if you can really focus on your self-care plan, which we can talk about because one of my research studies was on creating a self-care plan. If you can really focus on a boundaried self-care plan for yourself, you will become even a more effective caregiver because caregiver burnout is a real thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're experiencing some of that. But if we put some measure in place, some boundary, and make sure that we're filling your cup up first, because if you get dehydrated, you won't have the strength to reach forward to your mom
Right.
and give her a sip.
Right. I mean, your work reminds me of how complex these situations are because my mother, as the Holocaust survivor, also um, there was no capacity to sort of empathize with my need to have any time of my own and and anyway, it's laden with a lot of stuff that I know you've seen a million times over.
And it's
Um,
very commonplace among
yes,
children of Holocaust
yes,
survivors. You hear
yes.
this a lot. And if you put yourself in their shoes, you can understand because if you come from deprivation and fear and all of these things, it's hard for you to nurture. And
Mm,
then it's also hard for you to have tolerance for
mm,
anything
mm,
except for exactly what is needed and wanted at that moment. So there's a lot of emotional baggage that comes
mm.
along with that story. And it really has reverberated among the next generation, which you are.
But, I was listening to one of your wonderful podcasts, and you also referenced boundaries, not just in the way you've described it to me with self-care, but you talk about even having a dedicated email file just for medical things. I thought it was really brilliant. You used the metaphor of the mechitza, which anybody who's Jewish knows is like a boundary that between men and women in a synagogue. And one of the things it does biblically, right, is it helps you not be tempted by not seeing. And I thought there was something really interesting about that. Maybe you can elaborate on that a bit.
I love that episode because it's very tactical. It's a way that you can protect the rest of your life
Mm,
from your cancer life. And I do really compartmentalize that. So I do everything that I need to do to adhere to my medical world. But when I am done with that, I am a whole being that doesn't involve that. And what happens is the medical system is so intense and so scary from the minute you're diagnosed. And it doesn't just have to be cancer, it can be AIDS, it can be
right.
heart issues. It's like it's a vortex that sucks you in. And sometimes it's acute and then you pop out of it. And sometimes it's chronic and you have to live with it, God willing, for decades because it
Yeah.
means living. So
Yeah.
I believe that I've become an expertise, not only personally, but able to professionally teach how to compartmentalize the medical world so that you can have the best quality day possible. And there's a study that I truly love that says how you start your day will be a great predictor of how your day will go. Now,
Mm,
I have friends who start the day in a totally bad mood. They can't survive without coffee, and it takes them hours to get kick started. What I said was, whoa, this research is so compelling. So, what can I do to stack the deck so that from the second I am conscious that my soul and body are in this physical world, what can I do to have the most joyful day possible? So, I have a routine that starts the minute I'm conscious that goes through the entire day. And then I pick up a routine before I go to bed. And I say that I do that because I want to have funny, joy-filled dreams. Why do I want to wrestle with problems and anxiety in my sleep. I want the best quality sleep possible. So I've even been studied because I don't need very much sleep at all. I could go without any sleep, but 45 minutes is fine. 2 hours is a little better. And I wake up at the 2 hour mark as if I've had a 10-hour night of sleep. And it's fascinating because I've met with so many sleep doctors and so many
Mm,
professionals. I've even talked to different religious leaders about the sleep concept, and I've heard so many different interpretations of why my body, mind, and spirit needs so little sleep. But I think that I could give you a routine where you could literally wake up happier and you get good at what you practice. We teach at Comedy Cures that it's like going to a gym. You're not going to walk into a gym and pick up a 250-pound weight the
mm,
first time. So
mm,
any habit that you want to have or change, you start small and you build. And I did an episode on Cancer Cheer. It's called Cancer Cheer. And it doesn't have anything to do with being a cheerleader for like a football team or a soccer team. It has to do with research that comes out of Stanford by BJ Fogg. And what it says is that if you want to change a habit, when we were growing up, do you remember they said do it 14 times and it will become a habit, right?
yeah,
Do you remember that?
yeah.
Well, BJ Fogg's research says that the way you change a habit the fastest is you self-cheer. So in this episode of Beating Cancer Daily, I started out with the cheer. So it's kind of silly because I'm cheering myself. But the point is, you do that. You do self cheer. So if I'm going to do something I don't want to do, I'm like in my head, and I do say it out loud. My husband says he hears me all the time. And I'll just go, come on, Saranne, we're going to do this. I know you can do it. We're just going to do it. And he'll hear me say that. And then I will do the task or thing that I don't want to do, or I don't like doing, or I don't know how to do. And then in the middle of it, I'll be like, good work. You're doing such a good job. And then when it's over, I'll be like, look at that thing of beauty. And so his research really shows that if you self-cheer, you will learn the thing much faster, and you'll also bring it as a habit much quicker. So I love stuff like that. And I love teaching stuff like that. So I've got you. I could get you up
You
and
know,
running
it,
a program.
I'm a professional storyteller and I work as a story strategist. I go into companies and help them use stories. And one of the studies that I cite in my work with corporate executives is, they've studied the brain now in relation to storytelling and its effects. And for me, the most fascinating study was they went into the worst inner city ghetto in the Midwest, gun violence, shootings, you can imagine. And they told kids to reimagine a different scenario for themselves or a different afternoon or a different life, to recreate an alternate story. And they literally measured what was happening in their brain during that period of imagining a new story. And every single physiologic level got better. Their cortisol went down, their endorphin went up, their stress hormones abated. The simple act of reimagining activated so many different things in the brain. It's so I think what you've done sort of intuitively or naturally is you've kind of rewired your brain's kind of more comfortable inclinations in a way that I find really fascinating.
Thank you. And I love the work that you do. And that study is a pivotal study. I
Mhm.
think I'm going to re-record an episode that I just recorded on narrative because I think you would be really interesting as a guest on it. And I love when I find the right person for the right episode. I don't need to teach every episode of Beating Cancer Daily. It's just easy when you
Yeah.
are doing 365 daily podcasts to do them by yourself.
Yeah.
But I think it would
Thank
be
you.
way more interesting having you. And I'll tell you what the premise was of the one that I did, and then we can re-record it together. But basically, I did rewrite the story because the story that I was being told by doctors was terminal. It was gloomy. There was no hope or exit. They told me to go home and get my affairs in order. That's after all the failed treatments that you talked about. You know, those 3 surgeries didn't work in the end. The 44 radiation treatments didn't abate the cancer. The 7 chemo drugs over 2.5 years, which is many as 3 chemos a day, did not hold back my cancer. It just kept growing. But at the same time, I had started the Comedy Cures Foundation because my first chemo treatment, I threw a chemo comedy party. Why did I do
What?
that? I didn't like the story of chemotherapy.
What's a comedy party? A chemo comedy party?
Oh, so what I did was I brought in 6 hours of comedy to the infusion center, and then I had sparkling cider, little sandwiches, little petite desserts, and just party favors for everyone. And so as people would come in, I would say, "Would you like to come to my chemo comedy party? It's a celebration of life party." And there were some people that thought I was crazy, and some people who were like, "Can I join? This is so much fun." And then eventually everyone scooted their chemo chairs over with their IV poles, and we all sat together and we listened to 6 hours of comedy. And then everybody shared in the party favors and the different, the sparkling cider, and then all the different things that I had brought. And that was the epiphany when I saw the impact that I had had on a major cancer facility in New York City. I had disrupted cancer for those 6 hours. My celebration of life and my chemo comedy party became so much bigger than cancer. And that's why I went home and that night started the
Wow.
Comedy Cures Foundation. So I told myself a different story and manufactured
Yeah.
that for everyone in the chemo room, chemo one. But then when I didn't get any good news in my cancer journey, it was all bad. I said I could go down that narrative, or I could go down a narrative that I like way better, which is that I watched my daughter graduate from kindergarten to first grade. I watched my daughter graduate elementary school, then middle school, then high school. Then I watch her go to college. Then I watch her get married. Like, I didn't put a time limit on how long I would be here. I just envision and still envision to this day total wellness and watching all those milestones within my family. Thing that's interesting is in that chemo chair, when I said to myself, I'm going to start the Comedy Cures Foundation and I'm going to bring this chemo comedy party around the world to people, I didn't see in that vision, oh, I'm going to get married again. It just wasn't even on my radar. So when I got married again, I thought, oh, wow, I didn't envision that in my story, but it still happened. And it was such a beautiful, positive thing. But I think what you're envisioning is really important. And there's an episode on the podcast where I talk about a woman with my same very difficult cancer who kept envisioning that she lived 20 years to see her kids grow up. And at the same time, I envisioned something that did not have an end. And her daughter, because she was fascinated by my work and my survival in the podcast, actually told me that her mother's cancer came back at 20 years and she passed away. And I lived forward. And she just wanted to express with me how powerful it was that I didn't just dream of the 20-year mark. And she understood now how her mom, who had such power to live those 20 years, all of a sudden got cancer 20 years later to the year date. So the mind is a very powerful thing. And the narrative that you hear in your own head is very powerful. And that's why one of the very early episodes of Beating Cancer Daily is called Your Cancer Voice, because I try to teach right from the beginning how to tame that tiger and make that voice work for you, not against you.
I mean, there are many studies I could quote and maybe will with you, but the other interesting one is that like at the exact same moment you're sharing your story with emotion, not only is that specific region of your brain lighting up, but exactly the same region in the listener. They call it neural coupling. So you're literally designed to spread the message, which is very interesting. But
I love that because they made it sound sexy.
yeah, well, one of the things I want to ask you is though, so you go home with no hope. At what point did you realize it was at bay or it was turning around? And do you think it was in direct relationship to your laughter?
100%. Our first study shows that I have a pretty impenetrable mindset and that I can teach that mindset. I did it in a research study at the height of the pandemic where I worked with stage 3 and stage 4 cancer patients from 10 countries and 24 states. And in 8 weeks, when the whole world was depressed and crazy, by teaching this mindset, and I used artificial intelligence to help track and create this self-care plan with a wonderful technology from Neoth. It's an app and a desktop program that is really targeted towards students. But I had met the founder of that and I asked if I could borrow the technology for this cancer study. And so we showed that in 8 weeks, I could have phenomenal results, reducing the depression over 18%, reducing stress 15%, reducing anxiety 10%, and increasing self-empowerment 8%. During the height of the pandemic, that is a staggering number. And anyone who was in the study at the 4-week mark did not die. Every single person in that study at the 4-week mark not only lived, but they completed the study. And statistically, in research studies, particularly early pilot feasibility studies, that number is unheard of. You don't get that 100%
Really interesting.
mark. So I think you can teach it. It's not hard to teach. It really just somebody that wants to learn. I mean, if somebody doesn't want to learn, then it's harder to teach. But that was the first part of it. The
Mm.
second part of it is that I realized that cancer was not going to kill me. Cancer rarely kills anyone. It's the complications
Right.
from the treatments and or the complications to your organs from
Yes.
what's happened.
Yes. Yeah.
So I was a journalist early on, and I decided that I would research how to keep every organ in my body as healthy as possible so that when I survived cancer, my body wouldn't have taken a toll. Those organs would be functioning perfectly. And so my second research study showed that I could teach with medical professional, of course, and using humor, that I could teach how to keep each organ healthy the way that I did. And because I'm not a medical professional, I had to rely on a great one, and that's Jackie Bryan. She's a functional medicine expert who agreed to do that study with me. She's a certified nutrition specialist.
Wouldn't the medication that you're taking automatically preclude you keeping your organs? Like I know my mother's chemo wreaked havoc on her system. Wouldn't the chemo pills wreak havoc on your organs without you?
There are things that you can do prophylactically to help nurture each part of your body. I mean, your largest organ is your skin. So a lot of chemos and radiation treatments impact skin.
Yes.
0 skin ramifications, 44 radiation treatments. That is such a rare number now. They are way shorter usually. Most people do not endure 44.
So give me an example of how you would protect your skin.
Hydration.
Uh,
So I realized that I needed to keep my skin very, very hydrated. I tested a bunch of different creams and lotions and things that I was told to do. And on my particular skin, there was a cream called Biofin cream out of France that was the right one for me. I find that most people, if they use 100% pure calendula cream, ointment, not anything that's peppered with scents or alcohol or anything, just pure calendula cream ointment, that works beautifully for a lot of people. Some people swear by aloe. They'll take an aloe leaf, open it, and they'll hydrate with aloe. Reducing acidity in your body. So stop drinking coffee, don't drink alcohol. There are things that really create an off balance with your pH. And if you can keep yourself regulated there, that helps your skin. Eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, incredible things. So even for eyes, keeping your eyes healthy, a lot of chemo affects eye health. I come from a family where two family members were blind.
Yeah.
I had to really focus on my eye health, and I don't need reading glasses at my age. And everybody's astounded. How is that? But I mean, it's true. Carrots do help your vision.
Do
Blueberries
you
help
also
your
find,
vision.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you also find that reducing the amount that you eat helps?
So there are studies that show in relationship to chemotherapy and fasting. That study was not out when I went through, but I definitely changed my diet. And the
Mhm.
third pillar to this that I wanted to share was that I was blessed to be able to have the Dalai Lama's doctor as my doctor.
What?
Yes. So Dr. Yeshi Dundon has since passed in his 90s, but he became my doctor, and he is very much tributed with why I was able to beat stage 4 cancer when Western medicine told me there were no
Wait,
studies left and nothing that they could.
what? Wait a second. Where was he practicing out of?
So he was in Dharamsala, and I didn't see him in India. I saw him in America. He used to come to America usually about twice a year and see patients I know in New York and in California. And so when I heard that he was on Dateline doing an interview about Tibetan medicine and Western medicine and the different impact of both on the body of advanced cancer patients. My charity's phone rang off the hook. That was in 2000, and it was insane what happened. I mean, the story actually was 1999, but I didn't hear about it and get to him until 2000. So it was at the end of 1999. The story aired with Dr. Yeshi Dundon at the end of 2000. I did not see the story, but my phone rang off the hook. I got tons of emails about this story with advanced cancer patients, and I could not get through. Why? Because they only had one phone line in the clinic, and everyone and their mother was trying to get through on that phone line, and that phone line shared their AOL dial-up. So it was always busy. And I just really wanted to see Dr. Dundon. So everywhere I went, any interviews I did, any place I spoke, did a keynote, I asked if anyone knew how to get to the Dalai Lama's doctor. And there was a woman in a waiting room at Sloan Kettering who knew how to get to Dr. Dundon, and she arranged for an appointment. So I ended up seeing Dr. Dundon at the beginning of 2001, and that's when I was scheduled for my fourth surgery that was life threatening. It was just going to be an experimental surgery, and there were really contradictions about whether or not I should have this surgery because they didn't think it would work and it could kill me. And so I really wasn't wanting to do that. And so when I got this opportunity to see Dr. Dundon in New York, I took it. And he ended up being pivotal in saving my life. That surgery never happened. Within 36 hours of starting his protocol, my cancer symptoms started to dissipate. Within 3 weeks of starting his protocol, my cancer slowed. Within 6 weeks, it stopped. And then they kept scanning me repeatedly because they were in shock with what was going on. But then my cancer started shrinking. And then by July of 2002, 18 months later, I had no visible disease. And
I'm sure they accredited themselves and not the protocol,
no,
right?
no, they did not in any way take credit because they knew nothing was working at
Can
that
I
point.
ask you just a little bit about this protocol? Just a
Of,
little bit?
Of course, of course. So what's interesting is that they were very careful to explain to me because Oprah did tell my story, right? And it was the most responded to story in the history of the most read episode. Pick
The
up, I'm sorry,
magazine,
tech
in the
people.
magazine.
Yes.
You mean in the magazine, yeah.
So my story was the most responded to story in the most read issue of O magazine at the time. And so they really felt that I needed to understand that Tibetan medicine was not just herbs. And I also needed to understand that there was no religious pressure on me to become a Buddhist or to practice Buddhism in order to find a healing. So I think that's really important when you're working with a practitioner, whether it's Chinese medicine or Indian medicine, Korean medicine, that you really understand that there isn't this string attached. Now, I already was meditating, but they didn't force anything on me. But what they did was just show me balance and practice, better ways to eat. For my body, for example, no caffeine, no alcohol, very reduced sugar, um, no sweet melons, no chicken. Like there were very specific things for my diet. What I found fascinating was that, first of all, Dr. Dundon said that I had good stress, good stress. Because everyone knows that I'm a workaholic and that I sleep very little and that I say yes to too many things. And that's a lot of pressure on my time and on my mind, body, and spirit. But he told me that that was good stress for me, that that stress actually fueled me and kept me healthy. The other thing that he said that I thought was really interesting was that my cancer was old. It was old. And even though the whole world said I was dying, he felt that I wasn't dying, that I had incredible life force, and that the cancer could be, well, he never used the word cancer. I found that fascinating too. He said the imbalance could be righted, and then my own body would heal my own cancer. And that's exactly what happened. My own
Amazing.
body healed my own cancer. And when I went back to one of my major oncologists, he explained it. He said my immune system wasn't functioning properly. That's why I got cancer. Now, we all have cancer in our body at all times, right? But our immune systems take care of it. My cleanup squad was out to lunch. It didn't take care of it. We can look back what was going on at that time. I was in a terrible marriage and I was going through a very hard divorce. I was a caregiver for my daughter who had health challenges and a caregiver for my father who had health challenges. And a mother who was blind. So there was so much going on. And I don't think I was eating as great as I could. I had too much sugar in my diet also. So you look at all these factors, and I lived in an area that had a high cancer rate. So could it be environmental, right? But what they said was I came with this depressed immune system into the cancer system. They further reduced my immune system by the treatments.
Wow.
And instead of working the way those treatments do, which is they knock down your immune system, but they knock out the cancer, then they help you build your immune system back. I never got the win because I was chemo resistant. So my cancer was going crazy. My immune system was lower.
Got
When
it.
I started Tibetan medicine, Dr. Dundon balanced my system, kick-started my immune system, and my own body did the job it should have done originally, which was clean up the cancer. Now, when they said I was cancer-free was July 2002. We're now in July 2024.
Amazing.
So that protocol has kept me cancer-free along with the other practices that I do.
Tell me something, did Dr. Dundon also take on your comedy cure as part of his protocol?
Yes, best laugh ever. I mean, we used to laugh so hard. It was unbelievable.
That's an
I think he
amazing
just
story.
loved it. And we can acknowledge that Dr. Madan Kataria is out of India, right? And he is doing laughter clubs. And he started laughter clubs at the same time I started Comedy Cures. Neither one of us knew about the other one. We've since been able to meet. And I actually did get to interview him too. And what an amazing human being. And then also Steve Wilson, who does the World Laughter Tour, who learned from Dr. Katari and brought it back to the US. What I think is so interesting about Dr. Dundon is when Oprah did my story, because I told about how Dr. Dundon was so important in saving my life. I'm in the room with Dr. Dundon, we're knee to knee, and he's holding O magazine even though he doesn't read English, it's in front of his face, and his interpreter is reading the article to him where they mention him and talk about how pivotal he was. But from my vantage point, I'm sitting in the chair, Oprah's in front of his face. And so it looked like Oprah was wearing saffron robes as a monk. And it just struck me as so funny that we came to this
Yeah,
moment and he
yeah,
was so tickled that Oprah told our story and he was
beautiful.
laughing. And I wanted to reach down and get my camera and take a picture because it was this unbelievable moment, but I didn't want to be disrespectful. So I have it in my mind's eye. But we used to
Beautiful.
laugh all the time together.
Oh, listen, I can't believe that the time has gone by so unbelievably quickly. I could listen to you for another hour. I know you have so many amazing things associated with your foundation, including a laugh line where you can call for jokes, a joke fest. Is there any last thing, lady initiative that we don't know about that you're planning that we should close with?
There are so many. This is crazy. How do you
Well, give
pick
us the top three. Give us your
like
top three.
picking your favorite children? Oh, well, we're working on a book. So that's very exciting because there are some people who will never be able to listen to a podcast. So we want to make sure we reach as many people as possible. I helped Kristen Dahlgren, who was from the Today Show, start the Cancer Vaccine Coalition with some other people. So we're working very hard to get an immune boosting vaccine that can help cancer patients. And we're starting with breast cancer. So that's incredibly exciting. And then, I'm bitten by the research bug. If somebody wants to fund more research, they called my second research study a new protocol in cancer care. We have so many research studies from my perspective as surviving stage 4 cancer that I would love to launch. But I think what I want to leave with is comedian Zarna Garg, who is Indian and came from India to the United States and was a middle-aged mom, attorney that stopped practicing to become a mom and to live as a full-time mom. And as her kids were aging, started to lose herself and feel depressed by the fact that she had stopped practicing law and had lost her connection to the outside world other than her identity as being a mom, which is a great identity. So her daughter signed her up for comedy class as a middle-aged woman. And she cold called the Comedy Cures Foundation, my charity, and asked if she could volunteer and told me that she had just started taking comedy class. So she came with her sari and her bindi to a Comedy Cure show for patients and caregivers and healthcare workers. And I saw her eyes so big. She was just in awe by how we had transformed the audience from ill people into like full of energy and lively and just hopeful. And so I asked her if she wanted to go on stage and tell a joke. And she was among headliners, major New York headliners. And she first resisted. And I said, I think you have a voice in comedy. And even if you want to tell one joke, tell. But look at me, and I want you to leave with the audience loving you. So if I wrap it up with my finger, come off stage because I want them to leave laughing. So she got on stage and for 10 minutes in her Sorry and Urbindi entertained our very ill audience. And when she walked off stage to a standing ovation, I hugged her and told her that a star was born on my stage, and I would do everything to support this mom from India in the cancer world. Do you know that she is now one of the most famous comics in the world? Her story,
Wow.
her comedy, the amount of followers that she has globally is extraordinary. And she just did her first tour in India, but she's a global sensation. So I love Zarna Garg, and I'm so happy that I gave her voice a place at Comedy Cures and that I get to tell you her story and the story with Dr. Dundon and just support the work that you're doing.
Well, I can't wish you enough success in all your endeavors. And of course, we'll be following you. And thank you so much it was very touching, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
My honor, my honor.
Best wishes. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.